And what I want to do, all right, we started to record here. What I want to do is I'm not saying I'm backtracking. What I'm doing is I just want to step back about, if this was a football game, okay, I'm going to step back about 10 yards so that we can get a running start and kind of review, just pick up where we left off is what I'm trying to do. And then we're going to jump back in. But tonight, we're into the planning process group, like I told you, and we're going to stay here for at least the next 3 full sessions, maybe longer. And I'm certainly going to take my time, particularly in the next 3 sections. That would be scope management, which I started last week when I introduced the work breakdown structure to you. We're going to look at that again. After that, we get into time management and cost management. That's your triple constraint. Okay, that's the three main baselines that have to be established before we can take our project in execution. So let's take a look at what we talked about earlier. Okay, so here's our planning process group. Remember, by the way, I sent you guys an email today, and I forgot the middle one. I sent, remember funnels and bite size. I forgot fences. So I guess I was typing too quickly, but here it is. This is the front end process in regular guy conversation to you. Remember the funnel we were talking about? That's the initiation process group going into the planning process group. The top of the funnel here were all the requirements, and then we funnel down to selecting the actual requirements that are going to get into the project. Okay, so the funnel is the first thing that we do. Then we do fences. When we do with fences, we're establishing our scope, right? So we're going to establish our scope baseline based on the requirements that we selected. We're going to remember there are 3 elements of the scope baseline. We'll look at them again. First one's the project scope statement, where it's a narrative, written scope statement based on the requirements that we selected. Okay, so let's say that we establish our scope now and we have a good solid handle on our baseline. The next thing that we're going to do is plan our project. And how do we do it? Bite-sized, right? So we look at some huge monster of a project and we break it down piece by piece. So it's particularly in construction when you look at, all the different mini projects within a construction project, okay? It's a really good place to look at the bite-sized principle in action. I can identify an individual task, then therefore I can identify all the resources I'm going to need: human, material, tools, time, and then I'm going to add up all my tasks. So if I do it bite-sized, I'm very precise, and therefore I add up all my bite-sized pieces and I come up with a final schedule and a final budget. Obviously, it's not as totally as simple as this, but this is the mindset. This is, like I said, the regular guy thing that I like to do. This is the mindset you use as a project manager. Funnels, fences, bite-sized. This gives you control, right? What does a funnel do? It controls what gets from the top to the bottom. What the fences do, it says what's in and what's out. What's the bite size do? It gives you a nice view that you can actually do precise measurements and establish baselines. You think like this, you're going to be just fine taking your plan into planning, okay? So like I said, this is where we're going with this. Eventually, when we're finished all of our planning, we will have established baselines, 2 of which we'll measure against once we're executing. That's time and cost. Scope we have to establish, but remember, we're not going to establish officially any of these baselines until all of our knowledge areas have chimed in, that we've done enough analysis of these areas and their effect and their impact on our project before we go ahead and baseline our project. It makes every bit of sense. Even like, let's grab something like risk, for example, okay? That just because if we actually analyze the risk and we saw something in the schedule that might be a problem, now we go back and we schedule around it, or we avoid it or something. But because we did risk management, it affected our schedule management. This is what I'm saying, okay? We have to take into account everything here, but our final product is this. This is where we're going to take into execution with us. The scope, we're going to build no more, no less than 100%, and we're going to measure our progress, schedule, and budget as we go across our project. Okay. Remember, I introduced the concept of progressive elaboration. That's how we're going to get there. So the last screen I just showed you of the triple constraint and all the knowledge area inputs to that, it's been done by progressive elaboration. Remember, I showed you First, you have like the bare tree, and then more and more knowledge and data starts coming back, and the tree gets a little fuller until such time as we feel. And again, there's no set line in the sand. It goes from project to project, organization to organization. In other words, the question is, Clark, when have I planned enough? That is going to be up to you. My answer to you is when you have sufficient detail to comfortably take your project into execution. Really, that's kind of that's your call, your organization's call, but you're the one who wants to make sure they don't take it into execution too soon. If you let your hammerhead bosses push it too fast, you're taking a schedule and a budget into battle that's not going to work. Okay, so really planning has a lot of value, and this is how we do it: progressive elaboration. Okay, remember I showed you this is how we do it, right? We're creating all of our plans simultaneously, and we're doing that because every time we have new information, we're 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 putting them into target documents that are common to all of our plans. These are the project management updates and the project document updates. So remember this graph I showed you last week of how every time we have a meeting or every time a new email comes in or a new estimate or one of our experts opens his mouth, here we go. We're starting to fill in our projects, our project plans, okay, our subsidiary plans. This table here is the table I showed you. That's the buckets. When I say buckets, those are the target documents for the feedback loops to come back to. First in planning, then in execution. Okay, but know these documents. Know of them. Okay, they're going to be on the exam, I assure you, and they all make sense to you if you think about it. The project management plan ones are the plan itself, but those project documents are the ones you're going to see us create them from as we go through now our planning process. We're going to create these documents. We're going to create them, and we're going to continually revise them. All of them are living documents, living, breathing, addable, revisable documents, okay? And every time we revise them, if it's big enough, we go back and revise the whole process again, okay? Let's go past. Okay, project management plan. Not through this. Hold on a second. Maybe I should just jump out. Okay, so I've gone back over some of the things that we looked at.
Hey, Clark.
Yes.
Hey, Clark.
Yes.
There's a website. There's a website out there. I think it's through PMI that actually has, like, instead of the way you were describing it on the sheets of PMI, it's actually, I call it a dummy sheet, and it does word verbatim of those projects sheets. Just letting you know. And if I find it, I'll send it to you.
I'm sorry. Are you telling me this screen here, this one?
Nope, the next one.
This one, the table for
the table, all those documents.
Yes.
They actually have there's a actual, I think through PMI actually has a website that's a link that actually has everything and kind of gives you an outline of how to fill everything out.
Absolutely, sir. Not only that, there are free templates. Again, right. I told you that when I went back to this screen, when I first introduced this screen to you, and it looked like, holy cow, Clark, how am I building all these plans in one sheet? This is how we're doing it, Aubrey. Exactly right. We're going to be using templates, and we're going to be using historical data, and you're right, we're going to lean on credible places like PMI, for example. Okay? Thanks. Appreciate that. But I guess, but for your benefit on that, Joe, what Aubrey's exactly right. PMI.org is a wealth of information. Okay. Okay, so let's jump back into scope management. I want to do a quick review, and then we're going to get into time management. I'm telling you, when we get into time management, we're going to stay there for a little bit, okay? Because it's really it's opening up all the work packages, and you'll see what I mean. But let's review scope management again and see how we got there first. So remember, scope management is much like many of the other planning processes that you'll see, and it's one of the ways you can remember in patterns, right? Is that most planning knowledge areas like scope management, for example, have most of their processes in the planning area and their control processes in the monitor area. Makes sense, right? I want to plan it and I want to monitor it. Not much else I want to do with scope. I want to plan it and I want to monitor it. So that's what I'm going to do. Tonight, we're going to quickly review these four processes again, and then get into time management, okay? I will show you these two processes when we get there. Okay. Remember we talked about defining scope and how important it is, right? Dimensions, materials, skill set, functionality, everything that's required. So the better that we can define our scope. So remember, go back to the requirements. The better we selected our requirements and the better that we had them framed in that SMART framework, right? Something that's measurable and attainable and all of that, right? So we know where our finish line is going to be. When we're talking about scope, we want to get those fences, that fence, that middle picture I just showed you. That's what we're trying to do here. If we get our fence around a scope, we know what's in scope and what's out of scope. Therefore, we can now start to estimate time and cost. But we have to get our arms around scope first, the base of the triangle, okay? So when we did that, we talked about time and cost estimates, how long and how much, getting fences around, and the importance of scope management, that scope creep will kill a project. So it dovetails into something we'll talk about later, a major piece of project management, which is called change control. All right, when we get into change control, you'll see that an accurate scope baseline really is the measurement. Okay, it really is what if you do your work well in the front end, you're going to appreciate it later, and when there begins to be problems or ads that weren't supposed to be, all of those things. I want you to think like a project manager and think about you're not just going to plan this and walk away. You're going to execute this as well. And you have to deal with personalities and schedule changes and speed bumps in the road and etc. A solid, accurate scope baseline is a great foundation for a project because controlling scope does two things. Gives you the accurate time and cost estimates up front in planning, and it also gives you an accurate baseline to measure performance against in execution. Okay? No moving targets. All right, so now the three elements of the scope baseline, this will certainly be on the exam. There are three elements that constitute the scope baseline or the base of that triangle. The project scope statement, which is a narrative, a very detailed narrative description of the scope and all of its aspects, all right? We wrote that because in 5.3, we defined the requirements necessary for our project. So remember what I told you, when we're looking at requirements for the funnel thing, right? Projects shouldn't go on forever and they shouldn't include everything. If they try to include everything, you're not going to be successful, or at least you continue to reduce the probability of success every time you make a project bigger than it needs to be. Anything that, it's also the time factor. Anything that you plan, say 6 months from now, is going to be more accurate or generally more accurate than any plan that's 2 years out. Why? Because you don't know what's going to happen over time. The lay of the land, the economy, the government, who the hell knows? Everything that changes over time. That's why the shorter your plan, the more accurate it tends to be. All right? Word for the wise. Project scope statement is your first element. The second is the work breakdown structure. That's that hierarchical depiction of the scope. So in other words, we have our arms around the scope and we need to show it in a depiction that we can begin to break this down for time and cost estimates. The third element is actually complementary to the second, right? It's the work breakdown structure dictionary. I know I showed you a work breakdown structure before. It looks like a pyramid and it also takes on other forms. But I show it in pyramid because it makes the most sense teaching it that way. Okay. But think about in each one of those boxes, all the information I might want to know about each and every one of the elements. Just too much. I couldn't get it all in there. So therefore I create a side document, the work breakdown structure dictionary, which is complementary to the work breakdown structure itself. So these three elements constitute the scope baseline. And of course, we didn't get there until we did rounds and rounds of progressive elaboration from all of our knowledge areas. But this will be on the exam, okay? We talked about ensuring only the work that to required and only the work. I'll bet you there's a softball question on the exam about this, all right? That it's the 100% rule, and I'm going to show it to you again, that as project managers, we want to do exactly what's required, no more, no less, in the perfect world, in a perfect world, okay? Establishing a scope baseline does that for us. At least it's a controlling device. If we want to let stuff in, we can, but the line is clear, all right? And we use a controlling device layer. Project scope and product scope, know that there's both. And when we look at scope management, here's the processes. Again, the dot one, and I affectionately call them dot ones from now on. You'll see time management, cost management, risk management, etc. They all have dot ones. And what are they? What's the dot one? It's the management plan within that knowledge area. Okay, so it's the rules of the road for scope management, for example. So it's the process that creates the scope management plan, a document that describes the project, how the project will be defined, validated, and controlled. So the rules that we would want to know about scope. How do we define scope? How do we change scope? Et cetera, et cetera. What are the measurements we might use? What are the terminology we might use? Et cetera, et cetera. Whatever rules or vagueness there might be about scope, we're going to establish them right here. And believe me, this is your friend. These dot one plans are your friend as a project manager, particularly if you got involved early in the planning, because remember, you now control the rules. If you're the one making the rule book, isn't that great? Isn't that great for a project manager? If we're the one making the rules that we have to, this is what we want to do. And we don't want to do it just for our own benefit. We make rules that we know put controls in the project that we are comfortable with. That's what this is all about, putting controls in for scope. That's it. We just don't do this in a willy-nilly fashion. So all dot ones are pretty much the same from their purpose standpoint. Again, we looked at the process itself, and we came up with, remember, there's two outputs from 5.1, scope management plan and a requirements management plan. But the inputs make sense to you. And remember, I told you that's another thing to remember for pattern for the test, that the output of the previous process is usually the input, and not always, but it usually is, and that makes sense, particularly within a knowledge area. So 5.1 to 5.2 to 5.3 and so forth. Okay, that makes every bit of sense, correct? We're looking, and don't forget your EES and OPAs. And I know I've talked about those, but remember, that's the big picture. That's the organization that you're within, and all the rules and regulations and tools and culture and everything else. You really can't understate its importance as an input. Okay, I'll go ahead go past some of these inputs here, these outputs here. But as you know, that there's the three elements of the scope baseline: a requirements management plan that describes how requirements are planned, tracked, and reported, much like a scope management plan. If we're going to add new requirements, it's going to be subjected to the requirements management plan first, and then looked at by the scope management. Just like we did in the beginning, right? We looked at requirements first, scope second. And remember the traceability. It's big time for us. 5.2 is about collecting requirements. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and go past this because I believe you guys have that down pat. Let's go here. Let's start here with the work breakdown structure. Okay. I want to review this because, one, it's a very important document. It might be the most powerful, single most powerful document in project management is the work breakdown structure. And I say that because I use it to help me plan everything else. I know I mentioned before we're going to make breakdown structures in a lot of the other knowledge areas as well. And in order to make sure those breakdown structures are correct, I'm almost building them side by side next to my work breakdown structures to make sure that I didn't miss any aspect or piece of my project as I'm planning risk or resources or quality. Okay. For the exam, remember I told you we're looking to try to get it down into bite-sized pieces. This is how you take a big, huge project and break it down into bite-sized pieces that can be under a microscope. Okay, individual tasks. That's where we're going tonight. We're gonna identify individual tasks, every single task that's going to be needed in each one of these work packages. And then we're gonna identify the resources needed. We're going to identify the time needed, the duration, and we're going to calculate it for time and cost estimates. You'll see that this evening. For the exam, remember they'll refer to work breakdown structures, or at least the contact of it, in 3 levels. Okay, the level 1. If they say level 1, they mean the top level there, the project itself. In this case, it's the widget management system. Okay. Level 2 is the first natural breakdown, all right? And again, this is much like project life cycles. Remember, I showed you that life cycles are something that's particular to your project. So that first breakdown from level 1 to level 2 is pretty important decision for you. There's no rules here. about what should be the second level. The second level should be reflective of your project. So if that project life cycle that I showed you earlier, design, test, rollout, all that works, then that should be your second level. Think about this. You're going to continually decompose each level down so that you don't miss anything in scope. So if the project life cycle is the best use of this of level 2, then use that. On the exam, the next thing they're going to ask you about is level 3. They're either going to say work packages or they're going to say level 3. They mean the same thing. The work packages and level 3 mean the same thing. They're synonymous on the exam, okay? And what that is the actual activities that it's going to take to build the scope of the levels above, from levels 2 and level 1, all right? The work breakdown structure is a deliverable based document. So remember, in scope management, we stopped at scope, right? We stopped at where we identified areas of activity. We identified work packages, but we didn't go any further than that. The main purpose here of the work breakdown structure in scope management is to establish scope, not the activities, the scope. The activities we're going to identify next. The very first thing we don't want to do is make sure we didn't miss anything from scope. What are we required to deliver? How and when, we're going to figure out later. First, let's identify and define the animal, and that is going to be on the exam. The work breakdown structure is a deliverable-based document, okay? To create that work breakdown structure, I just talked about it, and break it down in smaller and smaller, and break it down chunk by chunk by chunk until we get down to work packages. You can't miss this way, all right? If you do this in a deliberate fashion, breaking down piece by piece, you're not going to miss a thing. You'll account for everything, and that's really what it's all about. When I talk about the 100% rule, all right, where we're talking, let me get to that, all right? The work pound for pound, the most single powerful document in the project. Let me go back to work. I hope I got another picture of the work breakdown structure. I do. Okay. In this work breakdown structure, okay, like I said, it's a deliverable based, all right, and that these work packages here are going into where we're going next. That's where we're going next into time management. I want to talk about the 100% rule for a second here. This will be on the exam. The 100% rule says that every level if you complete a level, it completes the level above. That's the power of a breakdown structure, is that I'm forced to make sure that the level that I'm creating satisfies the level above, or I'm not done yet. And then when I decompose it further, the same rule applies. The 100% rule applies top down and bottom up. And 100% means 100%, not 99% or 101%. Again, the softball question on the exam, that in a perfect world, we create exactly what was required in scope, no less, no more. This is how we get as close as possible to that. Remember your 100% rule. It's going to help you as you decompose, by the way. That won't be on the exam. But I'm telling you, in the real world, Clark, I've never done a work breakdown structure. So I might fumble and stumble a little bit through the first couple. One of the ways it keeps you in check is your 100% rule. Before you go to the next level, that you satisfy the level above, okay? Word to the wise. But for the exam, that's what you need to know. These are the things that's all they're going to ask you. I'm telling you right now that in scope management, and especially when we get into schedule management, okay, they get very, very complicated. We're not going to get that complicated. We don't have to. We don't have to. For this exam, you need to know the basics and the mechanics. But I'm telling you, once you're out of my class and you have PMP behind your name, educate yourself. Take those white papers and learn some of the more complex things about work breakdown structures and schedules, where we're going next, okay, to help you at least stay in the meetings, right? So that they don't lose you. You're a PMP, you're supposed to know what they're talking about. For the exam, they're only going to ask you about the mechanics like these. Level 1, level 2, level 3. The actual tool and technique is called decomposition, okay? Breaking down from top level all the way down until we've completely covered everything. The term is called decomposition, and it's brilliant. Why is it brilliant? Because it's simple. Anyone, once they get a hold of it and understand the concept, can do it. That's why it's brilliant, in my opinion. So like I said, the top down, as I break down from top down, I've accounted for everything. That's my scope control. I'm not from, I start to break my widget management system down. Remember, the 100% rule, level 2, satisfied, complete, satisfied, level 1. Same thing when I'm doing my level 3s, okay? I have identified work packages. I'm done right now. I'm going to take this and send this into time management. I've accounted for everything top down for scope. But what we're going to do next is we're going to go bottom up. Once we've accounted for everything, we're going to go into those work packages, these level 3, and we're going to break them open and dissect them right down to every single task. And when we do that, then we're going to be able to do bottom up estimates. We're going to be able to identify every single thing we need. And as we identify those estimates, we're going to roll them up. We're going to add them all up. And when we add up all our estimates, we're going to have a schedule and we're going to have a budget. I'll show you what we do. And remember control accounts. This will be on the exam too. Peppered through our work breakdown structure could be control accounts. Here we're using these for different uses. We may be doing these just to do summary summary totals for a particular section of a project. We may use a control account that actually kicks off an accounting process to pay a vendor. There are several reasons why we might want to do this, but the best answer I can give you is it allows us to do some micromanagement. Okay, it allows us to do some micromanagement on our project. Okay, we created that work breakdown structure using decomposition and expert judgment. Talk about expert judgment in a little bit here. Again, I just want to give you a grain of salt on it, but take a look at tools and techniques. To create the most powerful document in the entire methodology is simply decomposition and expert judgment. There's no rocket science here. There's no slide rule here. There's no nothing. This is why I'm saying that you really want to keep yourself completely engaged in the planning, all right? Because if you don't lean on experts blindly, because you really don't have any other, this is your tools. These are your tools to build your work breakdown structure that you're going to build your estimates on. Decomposition and expert judgment, all right? There's nothing fancy at all about it. The output of the scope baseline has those 3 elements, and project document updates, the first of the progressive elaboration, right? Okay, so here's where we got to so far. And I'm going to jump right. So here's what we've done in some of the documents that we've created already. And at this point, we've started with a project chart and a stakeholder register coming out of initiation. We went over to 4.2 where we created our project management plan and the subsidiary plans that are being progressively elaborated. We're now going to go into planning, where I started to show you the first 4 planning processes of scope management, and we created these documents. Requirements documents that turned into a project scope statement, a work breakdown structure, and a work breakdown structure dictionary. Okay, let me jump out for a second and take a look. Here we are in the Vargas drawing. Okay, this is where, as you can see, look at all the planning that we're doing. Here's where we were at. We've been so far today, or so far today is right here. We're next we're going into time management, all right, where but I wanted you to see this is what's going on here in the execution process. I really do like this drawing a lot because it's well drawn and it's not too busy. It's really pleasing to the eye. Okay, so let's move on into time management. Here we're going to stay for a little bit, and let me see what time it is now. It's only 6:30. Okay. Here's where we're at in time management. So before I should stop, before I move into time management, I just did a review, and I'm going to tell you right now, that wasn't everything we did on scope management. We're going to come back through the methodology a second time. I guess I should have explained in the first lecture. What I like to do is go through the methodology, and I'm not breezing through. I'm actually giving you a good bit of detail here. But we're going to get through the methodology, then we're going to do a quick review of it once again. And then we're going to do mock exams, all right? We're going to do plenty of problems and stuff in between. But I'm telling you, what I like to do is take you through the methodology once at least through, because I don't want to have to, if you see it once through, the second time through, it'll reinforce, if nothing else. Anyway, were there any questions before I move forward in the time management about anything we've talked about so far this evening?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't have any.
Good. Okay, so we're all simpatico. Okay, so let's move into time management again. I want to point out to you, okay, this is the common pattern that you can see here. When you look at time management, almost all their processes are in the planning group with a control process in the monitoring control group. Nothing anywhere else. Okay.
Hey, Clark.
Yes.
This is Aubrey. Can we do me one favor? That level 1, level 2, level 3 thing on the work breakdown structure?
Yep.
What was the first one again? Like when they talk, can you revise when they start talking about like on the exam, this is your level 1, this is level 2, and then level 3 is work down packages.
Yep.
What was do they ask like all 3, or do you actually have to, or you just assume?
Well, I'm telling you what, they may ask you on the exam. Level 1 is the project itself. Level 1's the entire project. Doesn't that make sense? It's the top of the pyramid. So level 1 is the entire project. So widget management system in this case. Okay. Level 2 is the first natural breakdown from that. And in other words, you're the 5, 6, whatever top categories that are going to need to be completed in order to satisfy the level above. Then we're going to identify the work packages under each one of those level 2s that it's going to take to satisfy that level 2 element. As I satisfy each level 2 element, I've satisfied the level 1 element. For the exam, Aubrey, you need to know that level 1 is the entire project itself. Level 2 is the first natural breakdown. Level 3 are the work packages. That's what you're going to get asked on the exam. Okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And again, like I said here in time management, okay, it's pretty much just like you saw in scope management. All the processes are in planning with a control problem. Makes sense. We're going to come up with a plan. We're going to take it in execution. There's nothing else to do with it in execution except execute it, right? And control it. We have to monitor as the project is progressing. How are we doing? That's what 6-7 is going to do. But you can see we have six processes in the planning process. And it's just like scope management. I want to point out that if while I'm still on this screen here, if you look at, forget 6-1 for a second, because I told you that's going to be the rules of the road for that knowledge here. But let's say from 6-2 to 6-6, it actually makes a lot of logical sense, this step-by-step approach. Look at it. Okay, take a look at it. That if the 3 of us were deciding how would we manage scope for time, for its time, Clark, how would we do this? Okay, first we'd have to define all the activities. Then we would have to sequence all those activities. In other words, the actual flow of the work. Then we would have to estimate the resources we needed for it, and then the durations of each of those tasks, add it all up, and then put our schedule together. I know it's not quite that simple, but if you look at this from a logical standpoint, and the reason I do that is because I don't want you to so much memorize ITTOs, Aubrey, especially I'm talking to you here. I want you to, if you're going to memorize anything, I want you to memorize the processes within each of the knowledge areas, right? Because if you do that, they will help reinforce the logic behind each and every one of them as you see them on the exam. To me, from 6-2 to 6-6 makes every bit of sense to me, okay? And I hope it does to you guys if you see what I'm talking about. We have to break it all down, identify everything, and then add it all up. That's what we're doing from 6-2 to 6-6. That's what we're doing. We're project managers. We're breaking everything down so that we can identify it and slap a cost and a time on it, and then take it into battle. That's what we're trying to do here. So let's move forward with. First off, let me touch on this on the dot 1 because it's important. The rules of the road of planned time management. So obviously here we might even actually have more things to worry about than we did in scope. because we might have a whole lot of management I'm sorry, metrics that we're going to have to establish for time management that maybe we didn't have to in scope. We really want to take our time in time management because we're doing a whole lot more than you think we are here. So, and you'll see that when, as I start to show you, I have a working example that you're going to see this evening. You're going to see why I think that this is really one of the more important knowledge areas and why. It's particularly putting our plan together. So let's look at the inputs. As you can see, the inputs to 6.1 were the same ones that we saw for 5.1, right? The project management plan itself. And when I say project management plan, that means the collective knowledge of all of our subsidiary plans plus 4.2 and whatever state it is at that moment in progressive elaboration. That makes sense? And remember, the project charter is complete. That's the one document that we do not revise. Once a charter is chartered, everything else in the methodology has loopbacks to it, not the charter, and those EES and OPAs. And again, let's look at our tools and techniques. Expert judgment again, the front, right at the top of the list. Analytical techniques, endless meetings. So as you can see, we're really not doing a whole lot of rocket science again here. As important as establishing our triangle is, it's mostly done with human intervention, leaning on human opinion and historical data to get us there. The output is a schedule management plan. This is the plan that's going to tell us, like, oh, let's take a look at what the schedule management plan does. Just like all the rest of the dot ones, it's the rule for that knowledge area. Planning and establishing strategies, estimation techniques, rules, and metrics for schedule management. Like I told you, schedule management is so complex, folks. It's a credential in and of itself. Take a look on that. Yeah, actually, it can be a scheduling. PMI gives you a scheduling credential, making you a scheduling expert, because this really does get. And once you start looking at some of these network diagrams on real projects, there's big, huge spider webs. They're going everywhere, okay? And you got to try to keep it all on with your arms around it. For the exam, we're not going anywhere near that far. What I'm teaching this evening is what you need to know for the test, but it certainly isn't going to be enough for you to be a good, solid, expert project manager. Continued education after mine. I said it for the 14th time, and maybe 1,400 more before I'm done. We need to decide our scheduling method, scheduling tool, our scheduling model, and project information. You're going to see terms like critical path and critical chain here this evening, okay? Critical path is something that's near and dear to a project manager's heart, and you're going to see it this evening. And of course, the schedule management plan, the dot one here, is the subsidiary plan for schedule management. So it's the subsidiary plan that resides under the main project management plan. So what is it? It's project governance for schedule management. All right. Let's get into the meat of 6.2 through 6.6. And what I want to do here, folks, is I want to give you a little working example first. Then I'm going to come back and show you the processes that formally. But I want to show you what we're doing first. I think it's going to be more powerful to you if I show you how we do it first and then show you the processes. The first thing we had to do, remember, in 6.2 is define activities. So let's start with our work breakdown structure. All right. We've identified these work packages here. This is where we're going next. We're going to break open each and every one of these. And we're going to break it open and explode it. All right. Identify every single thing within each one of these work packages. First thing is to identify the activities, each and every task. So let's identify the tasks first. Then we'll talk about resources and time and all. But first we have to decide, what do we have to do? That's the first thing that we're going to do. So I picked a single work package to use as an example this evening for us. And let me zoom it. Let me zoom here a little bit. I picked install development system 1.3.5 for the example I'm going to give you now. But what I'm doing in this work package, I'm going to do in all of these work packages, right? I'm going to do them and I'm going to do it through rounds and rounds of progressive elaboration. But the process I'm going to show you now is applicable to all of these work packages. Once I've figured out everything about all the work packages, I just add them all up, right? So let's go ahead and move forward and show you what I mean here. We're going to identify the work package. So let's start with that work package I just showed you. Okay. Install development system 1.3.5. The first step, 6.2, define activities. Well, I've done that. Here it is. So I'm creating a little table here that we're going to continue to add to through this example so that you can see where I'm going with this. I've identified 9 tasks that once completed, remember the 100% rule, even within the work package, the 100% rule counts. Once I complete these 9 tasks, I have completed 1.3.5. I can color it in, done. Okay, that's the 100% rule. So between me and my experts and my project team and my historical data, I was able to identify these 9 tasks need to be completed to finish this work package. Okay, that makes sense, right? This is chiefly accomplished using decomposition and expert judgment by taking each work package and further decomposing it. Okay, we didn't do it in school. We're doing it here in time. Okay, the chief benefits are becoming valuable later when we're talking about estimating, scheduling, controlling. Because what are we doing? This is the bite size. This is the bite size that I was talking about. Here it is. 9 tasks of a single work package. I'm going to do exactly this everywhere through the entire breakdown structure. Okay. I'm sorry. I guess I will show you that. I'm sorry. My last time I didn't do this, but take a look. Okay. Here's where we're going with the actual defining activities. The schedule management plan, and like I said, that's another pattern for you to if you're trying to do memorization here, is that especially within the knowledge area, that the output of the last is the input to the next, and that the dot one is an input to all of it. You'll see it again when we get to 6.3, 6.4. Okay, so the schedule management plan, the scope baseline, we're going to need that, right? Because we need to identify all the activities. So we've taken the output and I don't want to say output because remember we're progressively elaborating this, but we're taking the scope baseline in whatever form it is at the particular time and further decomposing it. We're going to decomposing, and remember I told you about rolling wave planning, right? This is a project management tool that's used when we have multi-phase projects. That there's no sense in planning to detail all 5 phases yet. We don't even know how well the first phase is going to go. So rolling wave is a good example, is that somewhere about 3/4 of the way through the first phase of a project, we start to now really get serious about planning the second. So that because now we have a better idea about when phase 1's going to be done, what's going to be delivered to phase 2, etc. Okay, we use rolling wave planning, and of course the expert judgment I was talking about. The output of defined activities makes every bit of sense, does it not? And it's the first of those project documents, the buckets, right? Those target documents that I was talking about that we're going to create. This is the activity list. We've the first 9 tasks we defined. Okay. We're also going to define as many of the activity attributes as we possibly can. And we're going to do that as we go through the rest of the process. So what do I mean by activity attributes? It's durations, it's cost, it's resources necessary. So we're going to figure all that out. But we're going to start these documents now, and we're going to build them. These are living documents, and this makes sense, right? We're going to have a list of activities that's going to be comprehensive to every single activity and the attributes for those activities. Okay? Create a little milestone list here at the same time. The milestone list is really going to help us keep. So far, we don't have a schedule yet, right? We don't really have a schedule yet. So we need something to help define us at the 30,000 foot level from a scheduling type of standpoint. Milestones do that for us. They're big picture, okay, of the project start to finish across the timeline. And we'll start with a milestone list, okay? Let's move on to 6.3. All right, so both of you have it understood 6.2, right? We took a work package and defined all the activities in it and put it in the table. So I don't think there was any problem there. But let's look at sequence activities. What do I mean by sequence activities? The sequence of work, okay, of between that. And the most simple example I can give to you is that I can't paint a wall until I built the wall. There's a sequence of activities of doing the work from start to finish. We need to line those activities up, okay? and sequence them. And what we're doing here is we're creating what's called dependencies. I'm going to get deeper into what that means. But that's for example, I can't start task C until I've completed tasks A and B. I can't, that's a dependency. That means from a predecessor activity to a successor activity, there's a dependency, okay? Some of them are mandatory, some of them discretionary. I'm going to get a little further in it, but I want you to get the picture in your mind that you're now creating a string, okay, of activities that as you complete them, you're going to complete your project. It's not a schedule yet. It's just a list of activities, but it's a bare bones framework. That's where we're going. So here we've taken our table of our 9 identified activities for that work package, and we put them in the sequence that of work of the work that needs to be done. These, as you can see, that's this next. We've added a column here, and these are the precedents. And I'm going to get in further what these mean. Okay, and then next, let's take a look at 6.3. But that makes sense to you, right? That we have to figure out the sequence of work next. Once we've defined the activities, the next thing you do is put them in a sequence. That's what we're doing now. See the schedule management plan. The dot one is an input to all of its processes within its knowledge group. The activities list and those activity attributes that we just created, right? There's the pattern again of the output of the last process being the inputs to the next. And we're going to need this. Don't we need to know our activities and our attributes so that we can sequence them? And that milestone list that we put together. And I'm going to keep a project scope statement and EEFs and OPAs. By the way, if you notice, the further we get into time management, the more you're going to see that the inputs, tools, and techniques and output lists are going to get bigger and bigger. Another reason why I wouldn't really recommend trying to memorize ITTOs, because it'll drive you insane, okay? So,
Can I say something? It did drive me insane.
and I think you're best memorizing the knowledge areas, the processes within the knowledge areas. If you're going to do memorization,
So what do
understand.
you mean?
Sorry.
What do you mean by the knowledge areas? I know the 47 processes you have to memorize.
The knowledge areas are scope management, time management, cost management, quality management. Those are knowledge areas. And this
Okay.
and the processes underneath of them, I just showed you 7. We're in time management, for example, right now, and there are 7 processes. So
Right.
so that's what I want you to memorize. 6.1 through 6.7, for example. That's what I would want. And that's not up to me. It's up to you, whatever. I'm just telling you that it seems to me that if I know all my processes within a knowledge group and I know I have a good working, solid understanding of what each process does, I'm going to be really fat, dumb, and happy for the exam. I really am. If I know what I'm supposed to be doing, then I'm going to remember some of these things that I don't have to memorize them. Like, for example, here's a new tool and technique. The question you just asked me kind of dovetails into where we're at right now at this moment. PDM is a tool and technique for sequencing activities. That's precedence diagram method. I'm going to show you that in a minute. But all that is a graphic representation of the sequence of the work. So it's not rocket science. But there's no real sense in trying to memorize all of this. You know that when I'm sequencing activities, I'm going to do it in precedence. Therefore, a diagram. You memorized it right there by just knowing the activity. Dependency determination. We're going to determine, because not everything's a waterfall. Not all of our tasks go from task 1 to task 2 to task 3 to task. That's not how it works in the real world. We have different dependency determined, and we're going to have to make those determinations. This will be on the exam, and I'm going to show them to you this evening. Okay? Remember what I said about dependencies. That's between tasks, right? The flow of work. I'm going to show you leads and lags, all right? I will explain that when we get there. But these are tools that are great for schedule compression. I can move, in a lead case, I can move an activity up in the schedule a little bit. In a lag, I can move it back a little bit, okay? I'm going to show you how that works and why I would want to do that. The output of 6.1 is that schedule network diagram, that PDM that I'm going to show you how we built that, and we're going to build upon that. So as you can see what we're doing, we continually build on what we just did until we finally get to a complete schedule. So we're really starting with a list that turns into a frame that turns into a schedule. Okay? That's how it's done in the real world. In the exam, this is the flow and the basics that you're going to need to know. And of course, project document updates. So the effective progressive elaboration, right? This is that precedence diagram that I was talking about, folks. Let me stop here because I really want you to see this before I move any further, okay, that you get this. Because really, this is the framework of those. This are those 9 tasks put together based on its dependencies, on its flow here. Look at the table, and then look what I'm going to do now, okay? As you can see, let's look at the table. Table says that tasks A and B really don't have anything precedent, don't have a preceded by. What does that mean? That means that both tasks A and B can start right away. They don't have to wait for any reason. That's just other than the start of the project. The project started, I can do A and B right away. But task C, when I go over to the precedents and I see A and B, what that means is that C cannot start until A is finished and B is finished. Both A and B have to be finished before C can start. That's what I'm showing you here in the precedence diagram. Did you both see that before I go further?
Yes.
Yep.
Good. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be. I really want to keep this as simple as I possibly can because, like I said, this does get tougher. And if I lose you at all, you stop me. Okay. So let's go to the next one. D. Let's see if you guys can help me out here. It's preceded by A, right? So what does that mean? That, right? That D can start as soon as A is completed. I can start D if I want to. I haven't decided that yet, but I can if I want to. All right, you seen that? Now let's go to E. E has 3 predecessors. Okay, so that means E can't start until A is done, B is done, and C is done. And I'm going to show you how that makes an impact on our schedule. All right, all these dependencies.
That's a good question on that, Clark.
You most certainly can. So I don't want to move an inch off of the screen until we have full comprehension. So go ahead. What's your question?
The question is, and I'm talking, and I have a study group on top of this video. So, and I have a person that did a PM, or he just got his PMP. That's how I knew about the sheet thing I told you about.
Okay.
He said that they're just going to turn around and give you a paragraph, and you have to draw this diagram.
Yep.
So my question is, how do you know where to place E or D or whatever? Do you just imaginary just draw a box and place E there, or
well,
do you have?
Actually, Aubrey, I could start out with them all in a line if I want to, but the precedents are going to decide where they end up, right? And
Okay.
and why did I put E down there instead of top with it? Because it looks nicer. But its place in the drawing, left to right, was decided by the precedents. Okay?
Okay.
You can't draw this thing wrong. The purpose of this is to establish the precedents. You can't really draw this thing wrong. You're not going to have to draw something on the screen. They're going to, your friend, here's what your friend meant, okay? You're going to have to draw this out. They're going to give you within the paragraph, and we're not even there yet. We're going to get a little further, but they're going to give you all the information about the durations of each of these tasks. And the questions are going to be identify critical path. Identify float on task D. That's what they're going to ask you, and we're getting there. We're going to get there in the next half hour or so. Maybe after the break, we might take a break because it's a weighty enough that maybe we'll take a break and we'll come back to it. Let me finish this first, and I appreciate every single question. Seriously, I don't want to move any faster. We can make time up later in the course. We can. I want to make sure that here in scope, time, and cost that you guys have solid, and I mean solid understanding of where we're going with this. And again, these are nice, simple examples. And when we get to the test, we're going to talk again. We'll raise that question again here in a few minutes. Okay, so let's go to F. F is only waiting for E, correct? So there, that shows that. But G, if we're following it, right, folks, it needs both D and F to be completed. H only is waiting for G. I only waiting for H, and then we're done. This is the precedence diagram based on that, and we're going to build on this. This is the beginning of a framework, right? This is like popsicle sticks put together, and we're going to put sides on, and we're going to put a roof on, and we're going to, right? But this is just a popsicle stick house, all right? That's going to eventually turn into our schedule. We have so far yet to go, including all the real world stuff that I'm going to talk about. But for the exam, you start with a precedence diagram. Do either of you have any questions at all about that table, the diagram, how I did it, or anything before I move on?
You answered mine.
Good. Good. I'm glad. I want you guys to feel strong about where we're going here, particularly here, because this is so important. Okay. Now we're going to talk about those dependencies, and we're going to get through the dependencies, and then we're going to take a little break. Okay. Remember I told you that you have dependencies between tasks. As I look down the flow of a project, when I have one task leading into another. So I have a predecessor and I have a successor, and that's the terms I'm going to use, okay? PDM uses 4 different logical relationships between a predecessor and a successor activity, okay? These are the 4, and I'm going to show you each of them. Finish to start, finish to finish, start to start, and start to finish. I'm going to show you each one, okay? And our activities on node. So in other words, as we're doing our activities in that precedence diagram, we're putting a lot of information right on the node, okay? Much like a work breakdown structured dictionary does. Okay, dependencies can be either mandatory or discretionary. I want you to think about that a second, okay? The flow of work, all right? Let's take a construction project, for example. I can't start building frames until I've laid the foundation, right? I mean, just a nice simple example. So that's a mandatory dependency, is it not? That's mandatory. I can't get around that. I have to put the foundation down before I can do really anything else. It's a mandatory discretion. But let's say I have between a predecessor and a successor activity where I could change it. I could reschedule. Maybe I can eliminate it. Maybe I can reroute it. Those would be discretionary dependencies. And the reason I want to point those out to you is because they're going to be gold to you later on in the project. If you can, in other words, maybe the project is starting to fall a little bit behind schedule. You don't necessarily have to do major surgery to fix it. You might be able to do some nips and tucks. And some of the places you're going to be able to do some nips and tucks are going to be in those discretionary dependencies, okay? Where maybe you can break them up and go in a different route and actually compress your schedule. The test is going to either use the words mandatory and discretionary, or they're going to use the term hard logic or soft logic, because these are logical relationships. Just like if you guys did any PLCs, it's like a ladder logic kind of thing, okay? But I want you to keep that in mind. Think like a project manager for a second, that these dependencies can be either mandatory or discretionary. And if they're discretionary, then maybe I can move them around later, okay? I might need to. Okay. You also have internal and external dependencies, right? So I have dependencies that are internal to the project and external to, say, maybe my vendors, or I need some kind of government thing to happen, or whatever's outside of the project that affects mine. It's a dependency. It needs to get done. It needs to be completed before something else can be done or the project can be completed. Keep in mind. And then leads and lags. I know I talked about that. I'm going to show you those this evening. Those are another place where we can do those little nips and tucks to try to compress our schedule back on path again, okay? Leads and lags. So let me show you these dependencies. Let me show you leads and lags, and we're going to take a break, okay? The first dependency is finish to start. It's the most common. This is the waterfall one, where if I set studs before I can hang the drywall, if you notice, the dependency is this: finish to start. That's where you come up with, and on a network diagram, the acronym is FS, finish to start. Okay, this means that I can't start task B until I finished task A. Again, this is the most common of the 4 dependencies I'm going to show you. This is the most common, and And in this case, it looks like it's going to be a mandatory dependency. It looks like it's mandatory. Okay, not necessarily, but I mean, we as project managers are going to look at it. Okay, the second is called finish to finish, and this requires the initial activity remain ahead of the successor activity. So the completion of the successor is contingent upon the completion of the predecessor. So that means in this case, and this is an FF, finish to finish. This means I can't complete the task C until I've completed task B. Why would I do this? Because I can give you the best example is as a project manager, I want some kind of controls built into my schedule. And this is a good one. What kind of control is this, Clark? Let's say I'm on a construction crew. I have a drywall crew and I have a painting crew. They're not necessarily the same guys, are they? They could be two different companies. I don't want the painting guys to leave until all the drywall is hung. So if the drywall guys have some kind of delay or they had to wait for another shipment or whatever, task C is not done until task B is done. Your painters cannot pack up your truck and leave. You're not going anywhere. I put this in as a control, but there are other uses for it. On the exam, you need to know of it, that a finish to finish dependency means that the successor activity cannot finish until the predecessor has finished. That's the second of the four dependencies you need to know for the exam. We'll see these again. I'm telling you, we'll review the methodology a second time because I know this is the first time you're seeing them and you're trying to absorb them the best you can. And I'm sure you're getting it to some degree, but as we go through a second time, you'll see it a second time. Okay, the third dependency is a start to start. And again, this means that I can't start the second activity until I've started the first activity. Again, why would I do this? As a control measure. I have out there performing my field connections, for example, I have some cable pulling and lower level technician guys. But on the head end, that's where I have my top guys at. The guys that are cutting down all the head end connections, doing all the initial programming, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want them to get started on there until some of the field connections have gotten started. So I've kind of put in my own control here that they can't start until field connections start. It's also in case that A can't start when it needs to. I don't want B to get started ahead of time just because it was scheduled to be started. Remember, you understand what I'm saying? That if A was to get delayed and I'd scheduled B to start on a particular day, I didn't take into account that A needed to be done first, or at least get started first. Think like a project manager. This is the third of the dependencies, and this is SS on a network diagram, start to start. The fourth and the most uncommon, and I almost never see this in the real world, is start to finish, where a predecessor activity can't finish until the successor is started. That's the example they give you in PMBOK is like a security guard, okay, coming on, that the first security guard can't leave his post until he's relieved by the second security guard. I haven't seen this too many times in my 40-year career, but it is out there, okay? And it's SF, meaning that the predecessor activity cannot finish until the successor activity is started. Okay, those are the four dependencies: start to start, start to finish, finish to finish, and finish to start. Okay. Any questions, by the way, before I get into leads and lags? That was pretty self-explanatory. What you need to know is that there are dependencies between predecessor activities and successor activities. Those are the four types that you need to know for the exam, and their acronyms. Any questions before I do leads and lags?
Well, they basically give you scenarios and you figure which one is which, or what do they do you think?
That's exactly, they may do exactly that. They may do exactly, they'll tell you that to finish this, they'll tell you something. They'll give you enough information to figure it out. I don't remember, and of course I took my test more than 10 years ago. I don't remember them asking me to identify the dependencies other than looking at a network diagram and seeing it on there and figuring it into my calculations. So when we do the question like you asked me, they're going to give you a paragraph and you have to create a network diagram from it. They may tell you in the paragraph finish to start it. So you build that into your drawing. Okay. Leads and lags. A lead is a time that a successor activity can be advanced relative to its predecessor activity, like this, okay? So in other words, I've actually moved up in the schedule. In this example here, I've moved B up in the schedule 3 days. I moved it up 3 days. It's still a finish to start, but I moved it up 3 days. I actually can start this. It's finished to start -3. So I can actually start this thing 3 days early. And it's a -3 because in the schedule, from the perspective of the schedule, I'm actually shortening the schedule. But in theory, I just shortened my schedule or compressed my schedule by 3 days. That's why a lead is FS -3 because apparently in theory I've reduced my schedule by 3 days. This is a lead. Why would I want to do this? Because maybe I don't want to wait till all the drywall is completed before I start the painting. And in fact, I don't. This is how I would do it in the real world, okay? Right here. The drywallers finished room number 1. They're on in the room 2. The painters can go into room 1 and get started. They can get started, okay? I don't have to completely wait for all the drywall to be completed before the painting starts. I don't have to, okay? This is more of a real world thing. And I can do this to try to compress my schedule, okay? Where I can do this, I do. A lag is the other way, where I actually push back a successor activity. So I put a predetermined delay in between activities. Looking at this one here, where I do it's a start to start +3, right? Here, this example, it means that I've started the field connections, and I got the first 3 days worth finished before I started to do the head end connections. So when my top tech shows up, there should be a whole bunch of cable there waiting for him from the field, sitting there next to the panel waiting for him to cut down. Okay, I gave the field guys 3 days. I didn't have to wait for them to be completely finished, did I? Before I started the head end connections. But I wanted these guys to have about a 3-day lead, okay? So I lagged this activity by 3 days. And you'll notice that by lagging an activity, in theory, that means I've expanded the schedule by those 3 days. So this is represented by an SS +3. Maybe the most simple example of a lag is I paint the second coat of paint on a wall, okay? That I can't just, as soon as I finish the first coat, immediately start the second coat. I got to wait about 2 hours, 3, 4 hours, right, for the first coat to dry. So I'm going to put a 4-hour delay in before I get. That's the best, most simple example of why I might want to put a lag in for real reasons. Is that I need to put a lag in. I have to let the paint dry before I go back on the second coat. Those are leads and lags. Imagine the power of those dependencies and these leads and lags when first putting a schedule together and second trying to manage a schedule and compress it while it's being executed. These little tools, these little nips and tucks are at your disposal as project managers. They'll be on this will be on the exam. Before I move into 6.3, we'll stop. We'll take a little break here. Okay.
Okay.
Any?
This
Go ahead.
This actually reminds me of Microsoft Project doing the Gantt chart.
Which is exactly what we're doing. I mean, Gantt charts and MS Project is project management. And I show you a screenshot from it, but I stay out. I stay away from MS Project because it's really not part of this course. But you're exactly right. But that's you're not going to do this by hand. You're not going to do any of this by hand. You're going to let the software build the network diagram for you. You're going to let the software determine the critical path activities. It's going to do it for you. Just like any other computer program, okay? If you put the data in right, you're going to get a good result. I'm going to stop here. Jill, do you have any questions about where we've gone so far?
No, I don't think so. I think that the precedence diagram is a little confusing, but maybe once we use it in a real example, it'll be a little more.
You're going to see that very same precedence diagram probably twice more this evening, okay? Because we got more to do to it. So I hope maybe it clears it up. If not, I'll go back to it again and do it again. Was there something about it that you didn't get?
No, just about how we determine where everything fits. I guess I'm just trying to figure it out in my mind.
Well, like I said, all I did is I put the 9 boxes on the screen, okay? Because I know I had 9 tasks, and then I started to string them together, and I just made it look good. I made this, okay? That's all. As long as the dependencies are correct, that's the important thing. That's the important thing. You're not going to have to turn in a drawing. They're not going to ask you to draw something and then turn it in. They're going to ask you to draw it because they want you to do calculations from it. We didn't get there yet. If you draw this out, because they have a bigger purpose in mind than this. The most important thing on this screen is that the precedents are correct. Okay? So let's take ourselves a little break. And again, I promise you, Joe, you'll see this. You'll see this this diagram again at least twice before the night's out. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to just continue on where we were at here. I showed you the precedence diagram, and I showed you the dependencies, right? I showed you one more time the finish to start. Know these for the exam, okay? Finish to finish. And what do you have to know? You have to know the basics, man. I'm just, I'm kind of surprised. I don't want to say the PMP exam isn't. It is. It's very difficult, but what they ask you is the basics of each of these. I don't want to say basic, but maybe intermediate. Okay, the real complex stuff comes later. Okay, and it's after your PMP. Like I said, all the, the true scheduling credentialist guy, that he's neck deep in all of this, and I'm leaning on him. He's my expert judgment when it comes to this. That's an example of what I mean, of my team. Okay, start to start, I showed you these, and I showed you leads and lags. Okay, and that's where we pick up. So now, so what have we done here in 6.2? We defined all of our activities within the work package, correct? And in 6.3, we sequenced the work in the sequence that the work would be performed. That makes sense. Those 2 steps should be pretty self-explanatory, pretty simple. We defined all activities within that work package, and then we put it in, and we lined it up in the sequence of work to get it done. That's what we've done so far. Now that we've done that, we're going to let's look at each one of those 9 tasks individually and say what requirements, what resource requirements that each of those tasks require. Okay, and I'm going to add here, as you can see, here's our list again of the 9 tasks. The resources I'm going to account for. Let's even take verifier hardware requirements. Task A. Each and every one of these tasks, I'm going to estimate the resource requirements for, start to finish. That means the human resources, the skill sets, the materials and supplies that I might need, the tools and equipment that we'll need to do this. Every single cost that might be a cost burden on that, I want to know about it. So I want to know all the resources that I need to verify hardware requirements. Human, materials, tools, everything. And I'm going to do it for all 9 of these tasks. And I'm going to do it for all the tasks in all the other work packages. Okay? So let's go ahead and do this. Why am I doing this here? Why am I estimating resource requirements when we're in time management? So, that's a good question, right? Why is this process, and again, this is good thought-provoking, okay? Kind of give you an idea. Why would I be estimating resource requirements in the middle of time management? Because this is where I have all the work packages wide open. It's almost like open heart surgery right now. This is the time with everything open, all my experts identifying everything. This is the time to do it. This is the best time to do it. Since we're already well into each one of the work packages, dissecting them all the way down to parade rest. That's why we do it here. So remember that. Okay. And then we do the bottom up. So let's say for each one of those 9 tasks, I identified all the resources that I need, and I can quantify them. I now start to roll up here, 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 all the way up. I'm able to, yeah, it's a 100% rule, and all of my estimates roll all the way up. Let me go back to that again. Let me go back to that one more time. I've taken all those estimates now. So think about what we just did. I've taken my list of activities and I took each and every task and I identified every resource I need to complete that task. And I added them all up as a package. Then I added all the packages up all the way up to the widget management system, and I now have all my estimates. 100% roll-ups works exactly the same as 100% decomposition down. It accounts for everything, and it's quite precise. Okay, the 100% rule, remember, it's going to be on the exam. Okay. So I'm going to create a resource breakdown structure because I want to identify, what do I want to do here? I want to identify every resource that I'm possibly going to need for my project. So what's the best thing to do? Just like project managers do, we're going to use a breakdown structure. And here it's quite appropriate to do so. So now take a look at this breakdown structure. It's not the same as the other one, is it? We're doing a breakdown structure in the context of resources. So the top level here are all the project resources. That's level 1. Level 2 would be the first natural breakdown. I need materials, I need people, I need equipment. If I can account for all 3 of these, I've accounted for all the resources I need. That's the 100% rule in effect. Underneath each one of the level 2s, I break it out even further, as we see we did here in materials, and broke it all out. Building this, sitting it right next to a work breakdown structure. So I take my work breakdown structure, and this is what I was talking about, why it's so powerful. It's sitting next to this one here. And as I'm doing my decomposition, I'm looking at work breakdown structure. Am I covering everything? It's a great, great tool. Okay. So this helps you build. We're going to see other breakdown structures in the methodology. It's a fabulous tool, and they kind of feed off each other, collaborate with each other. You know, it's a great tool to use, and that is a resource breakdown structure. One of my pet peeves, by the way, with let me go back to that a second, with PMBOK is that they use this acronym RBS twice. That there's also going to be a risk breakdown structure. So I tell you this because as you're reading the question on the exam and they use RBS, make sure yourself which breakdown structure they're talking about, a resource breakdown structure or a risk breakdown structure. There'll be plenty of information in the test question to answer that. So, okay. And remember that the resource that you're going to pepper it with control accounts. This kind of helps you micromanage your costs and your resources within the work breakdown structure. And I told you there's several reasons I might use control accounts, but for the most part, I'm doing it for micromanagement. Okay. So let's look at 6.4 where we're estimating those activities. We can almost, before I even click again, we can almost see where the inputs are. That the input's going to be the schedule management plan, right? So keep that in mind as a pattern. That's the dot 1. The activity list that we created, the attributes, resource calendars. We haven't talked about this one yet. This is the first time I'm going to talk to you about a real world impact on a schedule. Here I am defining activities, I'm sequencing activities, I'm defining all the resources, and I'm going to put it together in a schedule. Am I done? No, I'm not done. I have to fit people into that schedule. So guess what? Before I actually make a schedule, I better make sure that my resources are available to me when I'm ready to schedule them, or else I might as well not even do a schedule at all. So part of putting a schedule together is doing this now. Looking ahead, since I've already identified my resources, looking ahead to resource calendars to see who's available and when. It's extremely important in my schedule, okay? And I'm telling you, before we even get to risk management now, that one of the biggest areas of risk is resources. And I mean not just being able to get them, but making sure they show up when they were supposed to be scheduled, particularly if I schedule them 3 months ahead of time or something. A million things could have happened in the last 3 months that kept this guy from showing up where I needed him. You got to think about all this. That's when we get to risk, we're going to talk about those kind of things. But here in activity resources, we're going to have a risk register. And again, I just mentioned that risk is going to be part of talking about resources. And really, it's a major area of risk is resources. Those activity cost estimates. We're going to be able to, as we're identifying our resources, we'll already be into cost management. We're already into it. We haven't even started. And why is that? Because think about this. I identified the activity and identified all the resources I need, okay? I probably have costs for that. I know what a technician costs me, $15 an hour, and I need him for 12 hours. I can figure a lot of this stuff out right now. Many of my costs, not all of them, but many of my costs I can figure out right now, or at least in my initial costs. So I can start to build a preliminary schedule and a preliminary budget. I'm doing them simultaneously. Why not? I'm identifying everything all at once. That's why we did what we did now. When the work package is wide open and spread all over the table, not only are we identifying all the resources, but the costs, because we know what our resources cost. For the most part, we know what they cost. EEFs and OPAs. There's your expert judgment again. Alternatives analysis. Remember, I told you earlier, there are certain places we might want to stop and say, is there a better way? Is there another way to meet the same requirements? All right. And this is where we're going to do those analysis. We're going to look at alternatives. All right. We're also going to look at published estimating data, because remember, we're not doing this in a vacuum here. Unless this is the first time this project's ever been done, we're building some brand new spaceship or something. It's probably been done already. And a lot of the estimating data is out there. Your vendors will certainly give you all the pricing you need. Let's say for materials are easiest. They're the easiest because they'll tell you how much per screw or how much per square foot or whatever. They'll give you prices. They'll give them to you. You're not going to have to guess on anything. Okay? You're going to use bottom-up estimating, and I just showed you it's the reverse of the decomposition from top down. Now that we've top downed it, we're going to bottom up it, okay, with our estimates. We're going to use PM software. So that's the MS project that you were talking about. So 1 second here. 1 second, folks. I need just a moment. Okay, I'm sorry. My son's on his way over, and he might interrupt, so I might stop for a moment here just to meet him at the door. He's dropping something on his way to work. But okay, so here's where we are at the PM software, and I'm telling you, we don't do what we're doing here on the test. Okay, you're going to be doing by hand. You'll do hand calculations. You'll do with a calculator. That's not how we're going to do this. We're going to use MS Project or Primavera or any other project management tool out there. Project's the one I'm the most familiar with because I've been using it since they invented it, right? But there's no way you can keep all of this straight. Think back in the day how we used to do this. It was pretty hard to do with post-it notes and whiteboards and cork boards and all that kind of stuff to try to keep things straight. Everything was paper based in a filing cabinet. It was just crazy. Somehow we built the buildings though. But here, use the software, lean on it. Don't let it run your project. It's a tool to help you run the project, okay? Enough said. The output of the activity resource requirements, that's the whole purpose of 6.4, is to come up with the resource requirements. We have defined exactly what requirements are necessary for each and every task in each and every work package. We created that resource breakdown structure based on resources, right? A breakdown structure goes top bottom. Work is about scope. This one's about resources. So they're each flavored differently, but they all kind of match up to each other. They all complement each other. They're all built for the resources for this project. The work breakdown structure was built for this project, right? So they complement each other. And again, the effect of progressive elaboration, where we're going to do project document updates. Now that we've done all of that, we really need to come up with durations, don't we? I mean, I have a bunch of tasks. I've sequenced them in a sequence of work. I even figured out all the resources I need. But one thing I didn't figure out was durations. How long do I need to do each? How long do each of these tasks take? That put together will become our schedule end to end, right? Well, at least a major element of a schedule is time. All right. So here, just for conversation's sake, I sat back down with all my experts and all my endless meetings, and we decided on these durations for the 9 tasks. Okay, just take my word for it that that's how we did it. Okay, for this example, because I'm going to continue on with the working example that I started with you a couple of screens back. All right, but as you can see, we're building our table out. We started with just listing our tasks, and we decided on precedent. We identified all our resources, and now we're coming up with durations. So we're moving down the path to build an actual schedule, okay? Let's look at the process itself, 6.5. Of course, the schedule management plan, those activity lists, you see the pattern, activity resource requirements, resource calendars, risk register, holy cow, resource breakdown structure, project scope statement. It's all EES and OPAs. You can already Aubrey, see that the list is getting, when we didn't even get to 6.6 and 6.7 yet, where you see how these get real, well, especially 6.6, this is even bigger. Look at all the inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques that you would need to know if you were trying to memorize them.
I want to blow my head off, sir.
It certainly would. So don't. So learn it like this. I'm telling. I mean, whatever works best for you. But let's look at these tools and techniques. We actually have a few to look at here. Expert judgment we'll talk about in human resources, but the next 3 are estimating techniques you're going to need to know for the exam, and I'm going to show them to you this evening, okay? Analogous, parametric, and 3-point estimating. I'm going to show them to you there. You have to just know of them. You're probably going to have to answer a couple of easy questions, particularly in the 3-point estimating. They're going to ask you probably to work out a problem or two to figure out durations on something. I'm going to show you all 3 this evening. There's also group decision-making techniques, reserve analysis. What does reserve analysis mean? Reserves come in 2 flavors. There's going to be contingency reserves and management reserves. What that basically means is we're putting together estimates, right? And for lack of a better term, I'm putting in a little bit of fluff, a little bit of, to my duration. I'm adding a little bit of fluff to my estimates, okay? Like human beings do, okay? For a lack of a better term, that's what contingency reserves are. That we've added a little bit of time to our estimates to make sure that we covered them correctly. The other type are the management reserves. Those are held outside of the project, and they're only for the big, huge things that maybe we didn't think about. That I actually need to go back to my sponsor and say, hey, I need more money, I need more people, I need more money, and none of it's in my budget right now. So I got to ask for it. Contingency reserves I can apply. Management reserves I got to ask for. But in any case, I do have to do an analysis because we just don't come up with a number off the top of our heads. We analyze and say the reserves that for each of the contingencies and the reserves for the management is based on X. Okay. But you don't have to do an analysis for the exam, by the way. Just know that that's how you do it. That you come up with contingency reserves for the known unknowns and management reserves for the unknown unknowns. You'll hear that again when we get to risk management. The outputs will be those duration estimates. And I'm telling you, we're doing this. This is about the best example as I can give you for progressive elaboration because our estimates start out big and sloppy, right, with a lot of range, all right? So a lot of tolerance in our initial estimates. The more we know, the more we can tighten up our estimates. Really, it's one of remember I said earlier in the lecture, when would I know that I've sufficiently planned enough? One of the indicators are my estimates are getting tighter and tighter to a tolerance that I can live with, plus or minus 10% or either side, whatever that we've decided that once we've narrowed our estimates down into that range, we're good to go. Let's go ahead and take this project in execution. But this is why, this is what I mean by progressive elaboration. This is a great example of how with round after round, our estimates get tighter and tighter and tighter to a point where we're ready to say, I feel pretty comfortable that that's a correct estimate and we can take it into battle, okay? And of course, there's more progressive elaboration. The more we do with all of this, the more that we add a document updates, the more we update the rest of our subsidiary plans, the more they affect our original plan, and so forth. Okay? So let's look at 6.5 and the tools and techniques and the estimation techniques that you need to know for the exam. Okay? The first one is analogous estimating. Okay? And what does that mean? That this is based on historical data or experience. So the most simple example I can give you is this guy, Bob the Builder. And I'm saying that, let's say he's a kitchen remodeler, all right? And the guy's been doing it for 30 years. He's the kind of guy that can just walk into your kitchen, just look at it and eye it up. And I don't mean to be so simplistic, but that's what analogous is, based on historical data or experience, all right? That similar jobs that I've done, I can make my estimates. Or I'm just looking it up. This guy here can probably walk into a kitchen and say, you know what, this looks about a $3,000 job. I'll have my guys out here for about 5 days. And he's probably pretty much going to be right on when it's all said and done. That's what analogous estimating is. It's either done using experience or it's done using historical data from past projects that we've already figured these things out. I don't have to go, I can go to a source and come up with the estimates. That's analogous estimating. Like I said, the best one, the most simple example is the guy that can eye a job up and give you any questions about analogous estimating before I move on to parametric. Again, you'll see these again, okay? But that made sense to you, right? That analogous parametric estimating is about using units of measure to help you out. Construction, this was real big, okay? Because I can take drawings and I can do takeoffs off of drawings. I can figure out lengths of cable that I need, how many fixtures in each room, because I can count them right on the drawings and stuff. These are units of measure, okay? So, example, let's see this tile, this bathroom tile job, all right? How much tile do I need? I could probably come up with a pretty good estimate by just figuring each tile is 4 by 4 and doing and 4 inches by 4 inches and do the math, okay? And I'm going to come up, that's what parametric estimating is, using units of measure. Let me say this before I move any further, that you probably are going to use all of these, that each of these estimating techniques are appropriate in different places, and they actually complement each other. Here, where do you think that they have the most impact? Parametric would be in material purchases, right? Would be in lengths of cable or in cords of wood or whatever we're buying, all right? And boxes of screws. These are units of measure, and they have fixed costs to them, okay? So parametric so again, like how much cable do we need? I can look at a construction drawing, and however you come from construction, you know what I'm talking about. I can look at a construction drawing and I can do takeoffs, and I can figure how long my cable runs are, and from place to place, and from unit to unit, all the way back to the main boxes and such. So as an example of parametric estimating, I'm using units of measure to come up with estimates. And again, no one estimating technique rules over the other. In fact, a good project manager is using all three in the appropriate areas. But do you see what I meant by parametric estimating, using units of measure to come up with your estimates? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I'm just taking silence as yeses, okay? All right. So now let's talk about the 3-point estimating. And this is the one you're probably going to see on the exam, okay? Is 3-point estimating and PERT calculations, all right? And the basis of PERT, which is the acronym stands for Program Evaluation Review Technique. I'll tell you that it was invented by the United States Navy. I'm, of course, a Navy veteran, so I love to say that. I don't have a problem with that. But when they were building the Polaris subsystem, they came up with all this is a weighted system to help come to more precise estimates quicker, okay? And here's how it's done. Your standard, let's take this as my data set, okay? I'm looking for an optimistic, a most likely, and a pessimistic estimate. So I'm looking at a task, for example, all right? And I'm asking my experts, how long do you think this particular task is going to take? Okay, that's my question then, nice and simple. And I ask them to give me an optimistic estimate, a most likely estimate, and a pessimistic estimate. And here's what they gave me. They said, optimistically, Clark, if everything goes right and all the dominoes fall in place, we could get it done in 21 days. If we have the pessimistic estimate, well, lots of stuff go wrong, and I try to figure on, some bad things happen, and maybe it might take as many as 38 days. But most likely, Clark, we're going to end up somewhere at about 27 days. Okay? So that's what I mean by optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic. You got to know that because they're going to give you these for the formulas that I'm going to show you right now. You have a simple triangular distribution. You have two types of 3-point estimating. This one here, where I take optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic and divide it by 3. What is that? It's just a simple average. That's all this is, a simple average. I'm taking all 3 of the elements in the data set and dividing it by 3. And so I came up with an average of 28.7. So that's, at this moment in my progressive elaboration, that's where we're at on this estimate using just a standard triangular distribution. But let's subject the same data set, 21, 27, 38, to PERT for a moment. And in PERT, I told you it's a weighted formula. So take a look at it now. I've weighted the most likely 4 times. I've weighted it 4 times compared to optimistic and pessimistic, and I divide by 6 now. And in doing so, look at the math. Now it says that my estimate is 27.8 days. Much more precise. In fact, it's almost a full day less, okay? Simply because I used a PERT, which is probably more precise, more real world than a triangular distribution. In doing so, I'm making a nice tight schedule. A project should go as long as it needs to, no less, no longer. So I don't want an 8-month project if I can do it in 6, right? PERT helps me out with my 3-point estimating. This works for estimates of time. It also works for estimates of costs. When I talk about optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic, and weighting the formula with 4 in the middle. This is not rocket science, folks. PERT is this simple, but you will see this on the exam. And if they're asking you for triangular distribution, so read the question. Triangular distribution is a simple average of the 3 numbers. PERT is a beta distribution, okay, where you're weighting the most likely and coming up with this figure. Does this make sense, the 3-point estimating, before I move on?
Can we go over the PERT beta distribute the beta?
It's a beta distribution, meaning that I weighted it. Triangular is simply just all 3 points are equal. With a beta, I've actually weighted the middle.
I'm looking at the plus in the formula. Sorry.
So right, so as you can see in the PERT formula, it's O plus 4M plus P divided by 6. Okay, that's the difference between the one up top, which is a simple average, to the bottom that's weighted PERT. You got to know this for the test. We're going to go over these again. We break out of the methodology here about 3 sessions from now. We're going to break out and do all those formulas. We're going to do and this is after I'll show you earned value, but we have to do financial calculations, project selection calculations. So we're going to see these again, folks. And those you'll need to know for the exam. Believe me, I'll make sure you know them all. But that's why I'm going slow here. Jill, are you okay with the 3 estimating techniques so far? Remember, knowing that you'll see them again. But do you have any questions, initial questions?
Yeah.
Everything's okay?
No, I'm okay.
Good.
Yeah, no, I understand about the weighted. I get it. Yeah, no, I'm okay.
Good. Okay. Now we'll talk about reserve analysis again. And like I said, I kind of gave you a quick description. Let's talk about it again. Contingency reserves are buffers of time inserted into the project to schedule to cover contingencies such as risk events. These are called the known unknowns. And I put these contingency reserves on each of the tasks and on each of the work packages. These, like I said, for a lack of a better term, are the fluff that I put into my estimates. Okay, that's what these are. The management reserves are for the unknown unknowns, to cover the unforeseen things that maybe should have been in the project that we missed, or some major thing happened, but we still want to keep the project going. And that's what the management reserves are. They're not going to be part of your cost baseline, but they are part of your project budget. I will show you what I mean by that when we get to cost management. But the biggest difference is that you need to know about contingency reserves and management reserves. The contingent reserves are ones that you can use. They're applied to the tasks. Management ones are ones you got to ask for. The first ones are for the known unknowns. You might probably going to see that on the exam. Known unknowns. and unknown unknowns. Okay? We get to risk management. We're going to talk about them again. The outputs are the activity duration estimates. So we've gone through the estimates, looked at each one of the tasks. We progressively elaborated it. We PERTed it. We did it over and over again. We have our duration estimates. We're ready to take those estimates into further putting together our schedule. Okay? And of course, more project document updates. Okay. Doing a quick time check here because like I said, I want to stop at a particular point that you're not going to be saturated. So let's look at those activity duration estimates. From this point, I'm going to take you into back to that precedence diagram, and we're going to do things, but we're going to calculate a scheduled duration. This you will have to do for the exam. We're going to perform a forward and backwards pass calculation. Also exam worthy. We're going to identify our critical path. That you're going to certainly have to do. These are, I assure you, Aubrey, the questions that you alluded to I'm going to give you, not just for a weekend homework, 3 or 4 or 5 of them, let's say, but here in class, because you're exactly right that they're going to give you a paragraph. You're going to have to extrapolate the information, draw your diagram, and do your calculations, and you have to do them quick. Okay? So this is your very first time, if you haven't seen these before, how you do that. And I'm going to continue along with the same example that I have been building up to this point, okay? We're going to calculate what's called float, all right? I'll explain what float, well, maybe I should right here. Float is being the ability to move a task up and down the schedule without affecting the critical path, okay? I want to know that. I want to know it's my wiggle room as a project manager. It's another place where I can do nips and tucks and adjustments without doing major surgery to my schedule, okay? And again, activity or node, where all the activity stuff will be in the node itself, all right? Now, I wanted to show you this because when I take you to the next screen, I'm going back to a precedence diagram. I'm just going to show you A through I again, okay? But I wanted to show you what it looks like on a network diagram and the elements, okay, when I talked about activity or node. When we put this diagram together and we put our durations together, we're going to identify an early start and an early finish to each of the tasks. What does that mean? The absolute earliest day that I can start a task and the absolute earliest I can finish it. I'm going to figure that out on the forward pass. On the backwards pass, I'm going to figure out what's the very latest day that I can start a task and what's the very latest day that I can finish it. I want to know this, don't I? Because I want to know about movement through my schedule. I'm going to identify these. These are the 4 big things here, along with the float that we're going to calculate now. Okay, but I wanted you to see that I put the duration right there. So you're going to see the same precedence diagram, but with durations in it now. Okay, so let's do that. We'll perform the forward and backwards calculations. So let's start with our table again. Back to our table. Identified all of our tasks. We put them in order. And now we have our durations. And we're ready to start putting together a framework of a real schedule. Okay? This for the exam. I'm not going to show you the precedence again because I already did that. This is exactly the same diagram that I showed you, but now with durations in it, right? That again, C can't start till A and B are finished, and et cetera, okay? We're going to perform what's called a forward pass calculation. Then we're going to do a backwards pass calculation. Again, it's the first time you guys are seeing it, so if it's a little hazy, I don't have a problem with staying on the screen a little bit, okay? And we're going to do plenty of not plenty, we're going to do enough mock exam questions that you get it, that you can do this sitting in that cube, okay, in less than 2 minutes or so that you can get back to the rest of the exam, all right? So let's start our forward pass calculation. I'm trying to figure out the duration of my project in real time. So we're going to start at start. Remember, we're looking for the early start and early finish. That's what we're doing now with this calculation. So the null activity start can start on day one, and it can finish as early as day one, right? Let's go to task A. That's the first, so that's the early start and early finish. We're going to do this to every single one of the tasks across and based on their dependency. So watch how I do this. Let's go to A, okay? The earliest A can start is day one because there's nothing stopping it from starting on day one. The earliest it can finish is at the end of business day two. That's all of day one and all of day two. That says the earliest I can start it and the earliest I can finish task A is the starting it on day one and finishing it on day two. I can't start any earlier. I can't finish any earlier. Before I even move anywhere, did you guys understand what I just did there with A?
Yes.
How about you?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go to task B. And as we know, task B can start as early as day one because there's nothing stopping it. And it finishes at the end of business day three. That's all of day one, all of day two, all of day three because it's a 3-day duration, right? There. Now let's move on to C. C cannot start. Remember, we have dependencies to consider here. C cannot start until both A and B are finished. So even though day A can finish as early as day two, I can't start C. I have to wait for B as well, remember? And the earliest B can finish is day three. Therefore, the earliest that I can start task C is day four because I had two dependencies to consider. That right there is a very important thing I just did. Did you guys see that? Why C is 4 and ends on 6?
Yes.
Good. How about you?
Because
Good. I'm sorry.
is it because
Because of the
1 plus 3?
That's correct. Because C had to wait for both tasks to be finished. So even though A is finished on day two, I still can't start C, can I? I have to wait for B to be done as well. And the absolute earliest B could have been finished was the end of day three. So remember, we're still an early start, early finish. That's the first calculation we're doing. So the very earliest day I can possibly start task C is day four because of the dependencies. And since it's a 3-day task, all of day four, all of day five, all of day six. Okay? Now let's go to D. Look. D can start on day three and finish on day three. Its only predecessor was A. It couldn't start until A was finished. And A cannot finish any earlier than day two. That means the morning of day three, D can start. And then at the end of the day, it's over. One man day. So it's the same day. I finished it in one day. D starts on three, ends on three. The beginning of the workday, the end of the workday. Okay? And that's the only thing that was stopping it. We go to E, though. Before I put the numbers up, does anybody want to guess when the earliest day E could start?
Day 7?
Day 7 is exactly correct. Harper, you saw that too, right? Day 7?
Yeah, I was going to say 11 and 7 because I was looking at A, B, C, AC plus E is 11.
So you guys both got it correct and for the exact right reason. Beautiful. We are doing very well here, folks. This is the kind of thing you're going to have to do on the exam. You have to do this calculation. Right now we're doing the forward pass, okay? We'll do the backwards pass when we're finished here. But as you can see, you got it exactly right. E couldn't start any earlier than day 7 because of the 3 dependencies it was waiting for, right? That's really the rule for both the forward pass and for the backwards pass, that you can't violate dependencies, okay? Can't violate a dependency. That's really the key. So let's go to F, all right? F is only waiting for E, so it can start on 12, right? It's a 2-day task, all day 12, all day 13, it's done. But we go to G. Aubrey, when is the earliest start I can start G?
Earliest you could start is, let's see, 3, 4, no, 7. No,
Go to task
hold on.
G. This task here. When is the earliest I can start? Look at the two dependencies.
6.
I'm sorry, maybe you're not.
Day 6, I'm thinking.
No, day 6 is way back here already. We're already in day 13.
No, I know. I'm looking at the top one, 3, D and G.
Well, I got to tell you, Aubrey, that's exactly why I
And
am.
F.
Because I'm trying to catch. I was trying to trip you up. I'm sorry, Chief. And I caught you. G has to wait for both D and F to be done. D is finished on day 3, but I can't start G yet, can I? I was waiting for F. So the earliest I can start G is day 14. I had to wait for both tasks to be completed. Then I can start G. And I asked you because I wanted to strip you up on that. Did you see what I just did there? Did that make sense, Aubrey?
Yeah, because you can't. D is, like you said, D is done. It's done. It's
Right.
you have to look it up.
That's right. And G had 2 dependencies. And the rule is you do not violate a dependency. So G.
The only question I have is, so 13, okay, that's 16. Never mind. You're right. And then I'm looking at the other one. So
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out the 12 and the 14 on F and G.
Right. Well, let's go back. Let's go back and look at F. It can't start until day 12 because E didn't finish until day 11. Right? It's a 2-day
So they,
2-day task, all day 12, all day 13 for F.
and then wouldn't be 3 plus 12 is 15?
Huh?
G should be 15 and 16, or
No. All day 14, all day 15, all day 16. Well, just take my word for it.
I'm calculating wrong. I'm calculating it wrong. I apologize.
Then that's okay. And what I want you to do is go into PMBOK later and take a look at the example that they give you in there, and you can see I'm using exactly the same numbering convention that they are, right out of the book. Okay?
Okay.
But before I move on, I just want to, Jill, I think you understand fully why G couldn't start. Do you, Aubrey? Are you okay with why G couldn't start till 14?
Because D was done, and you have to wait till
Beautiful.
F is done.
That's exactly right, sir. So now
Because it's a null 3-3 on D.
right, D's done. They can sit there on the shelf.
Right.
I did D and I'm done. They can sit there on the shelf. Still can't start G though. G needs a component. Let's say D and F are 2 things that slide together, and I need them both to do G. D can be done. It can be done for 10 days already. I still can't do G until F is done because the dependencies tell me so. Okay? This is really the key to do is the dependencies. Do not violate a dependency and you will not get your calculation wrong. Okay? Let's go to H now. H is only waiting for G to be done. It only has the one dependency. So it can start on day 17. Okay? It's a 3-day task, 17, 18, 19, and it moves on to I. I is only waiting for H to be complete, right? So it starts on day 20. It's a 1-day task. It ends on day 20. That means our duration is 20 days. That the result of the forward pass calculation is duration. 20 days. So if I was asked that on the exam, that's the answer. They're going to ask you probably 3 questions. They're going to have you draw something out and ask you, first tell me what duration is, then tell me critical path, then tell me float on one of the activities. You're probably going to see a question like that, a 3-part question. It's very likely, okay? We just finished the forward pass. Did you guys see this, and do you want me to do it again or explain it again? Because the next thing we're going to do is a backwards pass. We're going to figure out late starts and late finishes so that as project managers, we know where our leeway is, where our wiggle room is, and where it's not. Just as important, where it's not. Any questions?
So,
Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt. So 17. Let's look at H, for example.
Yep.
The way I was looking at it is I was always trying to get the 19 versus the 17. But in order to get to I, you had to do 17 plus 3, so that'll equal 20.
No.
19 plus 1 is 20 already, so that would get to I. So you're actually looking at it like 17, you have to add the what underneath H, which would be 3, to get to I, which would be 20.
No.
That's the way I'm processing.
No. On H.
No?
Nope. On H, that's standalone, sir. It starts on day 17. 17 is a day. You have to count it.
Right.
17's a day. 18's a day. 19's a day. That's your 3 days. Believe me, you can look in the PMBOK and you're going to see that this is exactly how they calculate the days. You're not worried about the predecessor activity. H is standalone, just like every one of these are. I even, in fact, showed, I did the counting for all 9 of these as I did them. H is a 3-day task. It starts on day 17. It ends at the end of business day 19. That's 3 full work days in the real world.
Okay.
You don't sound like you're convinced.
I'm going back from my memory, but I'm convinced. I understand it, but I'm just trying to remember how to process it all, understanding the numbers, because I haven't done this in a couple years.
Okay.
Studying it, so this is I'm going back on training wheels.
You guys will get, I'm telling you, we're going to have enough of these problems because these are the ones that I told you that we're going to concentrate. Right? These are the ones that take longer than 1 minute and 12 seconds to do. All right. And these are the ones that if you try to hurry through it and you're going to make a mistake, you don't want to do that. You want to be able to hurry through it, but get it right. So that's why I said I want to take extra time. You guys will see enough of these. I'm going to ask you to do these 3, 4, 5 of them. Okay. Probably this weekend. I'll send them to you. But this is how you calculate the forward pass. Believe me, I don't know exactly the page, but go into time management, Aubrey, and you'll see an example of where they're doing the forward and after pass, and this is how they calculate the durations. This is exactly right because it's real world. Remember, 17 is a actual work day. I have people showing up to work and doing stuff. I know because I got to pay them, right?
Right.
Okay. 17's a day, 18's a day, 19's a day. On the beginning of day 20 is when I hand it off to I. It's 9 o'clock in the morning on day I, okay? On day 20.
Okay.
Now let's do a backwards pass, okay? Jill, are you okay with the forward pass?
Yep, I'm good.
Good. Okay, it made sense to you. Now let's do the backwards pass. We'll do a backwards pass because we need to know late start and late finish for all of these activities. And again, in the big picture, why? Because it tells us where we might have some wiggle room and where we don't have wiggle room, where these tasks have to be done exactly as scheduled or else the schedule will go kerplunk and kerplooey. All right? So let's go ahead and do that backwards pass calculation. So we start at the end. And what do? The latest that we can end the project and the latest that we can the late start and late finish of the null activity end is 20, right? That's the late start, late finish. But if we go back to I, the latest that it can start. Now, the rule here is that you don't want to push out the duration, okay? You cannot violate a constraint, and you don't want to change the duration. It's 20 days. So on our backwards pass, the latest I can finish is day 20, which means the latest it can start is day 20. Take a look at this. There's no wiggle room. There's no wiggle room at all. I'm going to point that out to you later. This task cannot move. It must happen when it's scheduled. We go back to H. The latest, now the dependencies are in the other direction now. H needs to deliver to I, right? So if the latest that I can start I is day 20, then the latest I can finish H is day 19. Remember, now I'm looking at the dependencies now backwards instead of forwards. I have to concern myself with delivering because I cannot start any later. This is the latest I can start is day 20. That means H, the latest it can be finished is day 19, which by 3 days means the latest it can start is back on day 17. Again, look at H, no wiggle room, okay? Important. I'm going to show you that what that means. Again, now we look at we go back to G. G needs to deliver by 17, correct? So it cannot finish any later than day 16 for H to start on its late start of 17. It's the dependency. That's what the rule is. G, look, has no wiggle room. G has to happen when it's scheduled to happen. And I want to point out to you that, as you can see, that's a task that can't be moved, and there's two dependencies to it. So in the real world, I'm going to be really worried about these, making sure these get done, right? Because I don't want to move G, and especially in the domino effect of how it's going to affect the rest of the schedule. All right. Let's go back to F for a second, okay? Since the latest that G can start is day 14, the latest I can finish F is day 13. It's a 2-day task, which means I can't start it any later than day 12. F also has no wiggle room. It must happen when it's scheduled. We'll go back to E. E only has to worry about F. It has to deliver to F's late start no later than 12, which means it has to be done on day 11. It has to be done at the latest I can finish E, so that the latest that F can start is 11 and 12. Again, E has no wiggle room. None. Okay? But let's go to D. Looking forward to D does not have to deliver. The latest that I can deliver D is day 13. Since it's a 1-day task, I could even start it on day 13. Taking a lot of risk here, but as you can see, I could delay D, can I? Task D, I can delay a little bit. Not only can I delay it, but maybe I can move some of the resources that I had planned over there and move it over to some of these tasks that can't be moved that look like they're having trouble before I actually need to put them back on D again. That's where float's going to help us. Before I move further backwards in this backwards pass, do you see why D, the late finish of D is 13? Do both of you see what I did there for D?
It's because of -1 or
well, and again, the biggest thing is the dependency. D,
right.
looking forward, has G to worry about. G can't start any later. It's the late start that's the key in the backwards pass. That's the key to help you figure out what to put here. I can't start any later than day 14, which means D can't be finished any later than day 13. That's the late finish. As you can see, I got a lot of wiggle room here. I'm going to wiggle room with D. Let's go back to C now, okay? C has to worry about E, right? So it cannot finish any later than day 6 because the latest E can start is day 7. There's no wiggle room on task C, none. Let's go back to task B. Task B has to worry about both E and C. I did this on purpose. You're going to do B has to be done by day 3. Even though E doesn't need it until day 7, C does. So in the dependency rule, it's the soonest dependency that you need to worry about. It's the soonest dependency you need to worry about. B is a predecessor to C and E. It needs to be done by day 3 because C needs it sooner than E does. Do you see that? What I did, that I had 2 constraints and the boss one was the soonest. If I had 3 constraints, the boss one would still be the soonest one, the one that was required the soonest. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do one more time. For me to decide when is the very latest I can finish B, I have to look to the tasks that are dependent upon task B being completed. That's C and that's E. The late finishes, I'm looking at the late finishes C. I'm sorry, the latest that I can start C, the very latest I can possibly start C without affecting my schedule is day 4. The latest I can possibly start E without affecting my schedule is day 7. I need to finish B on day 3 because C needs it before E does. C needs it now. It can't wait. That is the rule of the dependency. So as you look at dependencies, the late finish of this task is based on the soonest need of it. The dependency that needs it the soonest is when this has to be finished by. Okay? And if you notice, B has no wiggle room. None. I'm going to show you what that means in a minute. But let's go to A. A has three tasks waiting for it. Does it not? It has D waiting for it. It has C waiting for it. It has E waiting for it. If we look at the late starts, the earliest is C. Again, just like with B. That means A cannot finish any later than day 3. I need it because I need it for C. Because I need it for C. Since it's a 2-day task, that's all of day 3 and then back of all day of day 2. Look, I have a little bit of wiggle room in A. I have a little bit of wiggle room. This was my backwards pass. And what did I do here? Take a look at all the tasks that cannot be moved. I just highlighted them. This is the critical path. The critical path is the longest sequence of non-flow activities through a network diagram. That's your
That's what they're going to ask on a test. They're going to ask what is the critical path, and you're going to have to say B, C, E, F, G, H, I.
Once you identify it, you're going to have to draw it out and do the calculations, and then you'll pick it from they'll give you 4 choices, okay? And you're going to pick B, C, E, F, G, H, and I. That's the critical path. Take a look. And why is it? Because it's the longest path of zero float activities from start to finish through the network diagram. They all have no wiggle room to them. That makes them critical path activities. That means we have to pay real attention to them. The reason that they make them critical path because if any of them are delayed, I will delay the final schedule date. I will necessarily move the scheduled date out. If any of these critical path activities don't happen when they're supposed to happen. So good project managers are managing to their critical path. That you want to know what your critical path is. And I got news for you. On some projects, there are multiple critical paths or multiple near critical paths. I don't want to confuse you too much. Don't worry about all that. This is what you need to know for the exam. But I'm telling you out in the real world, that's what you do as a project manager. You really want to, you manage your project with critical path in mind. That you can, so let's say that I'm having trouble with F, for example. I have a little wiggle room here. I might be able with D because D can wait. I might be able to move the resources over from D over to F to help it move a couple of bodies over to help get it done in time so that it's done, so that it does indeed finish at the end of business on day 13 like it's supposed to. That's called float, folks, or slack. You may say either term on the exam, they mean exactly the same thing. And what it means is how much I can move a task, okay, without affecting critical path. That's what it means, okay? There are 2 types of float, all right? First off, before I get into float, because that's the next concept, I want to get back to critical path here for a second. You guys saw how I did the backwards pass. Much like the forwards pass, it was based on dependencies. I do not want to break a dependency. It's a little tougher on the way back, isn't it? Because I'm looking backwards, but it's still the same mindset. Do not violate a dependency on the way back, okay? And you do this because you want to identify critical path and identify those tasks that would have float. That's what the backwards pass does for you. So on the test, the forwards pass gives you calculates duration. The backwards pass calculates critical path and identifies float activities. Okay? That's what we did. Ooh, it's almost 8:30. When we're right about where I want to end anyway, because I don't want to saturate you any further than this. Okay, so let's talk about float, and then we're done. And believe me, Thursday, we're going to pick back up where we left off. I'm going to back up a couple of screens. We're going to do this again. Okay? We're going to do the forward, backwards pass again for you. And it's on the
Do
V.
you want to give me a couple questions?
And I will give you questions over the weekend. They're going to do
Okay.
exactly like the test is going to ask you. I'm going to give you, it's going to be like 2 paragraphs with information in there. You're going to pull it out, put your drawing together, do your calculations, answer the question, move on. Okay? Let's talk about float though for a
Hey,
second.
Clark,
Yes, Joe.
my only question is, I forgot what this kind of diagram is called again.
A precedence diagram. This is actually a network diagram now that I have durations to it. It started as a,
Okay, yeah, that
this is now more,
started as a precedent. Right.
this is more of a network diagram, more like you would see in MS Project. If you clicked on network diagram, you would see this big spider web, okay, out there. That's what you wouldn't see a Gantt chart. You'd see this big spider web and it would identify the critical path. It would all be a nice big a line of red tasks, all from end to end. So MS Project will help you do this, but for the test you're going to have to do, they're going to give you, you know, a table with like 6 tasks or something. They know that you can't spend 20 minutes on a question, but if you can do 6 tasks, you can do 20 tasks. You can do 100 tasks if you have enough time. That's not the point. The point is I want you to know the mechanics of it. So you're going to get enough questions from me that you can do forwards and backwards pass calculations. So that when they ask you what the duration of a project is, identify its critical path, identify its float activities. Some test questions might even ask you durations of each path. We'll talk about that on Thursday as well. I don't see a whole lot of that, but because that gets a little fancy. But right now, from what I showed you a forward and back pass calculation based on the example that I showed from 1.3.5, and I've taken it this far. We identified the duration of 20 days. We did a backwards pass, which identified critical path, P, C, E, F, G, H, I. We see that A and B have float. We want to do 2 different types of float calculations that they'll ask you about on the exam. Total float and free float. And once we do these, we're going to be done for the night. Most of the time, they calculate to the very same exact number, but not always. In very large, complex spider web, they might come up with 2 different calculations depending on the dependencies of the task that I'm trying to figure out float on. I don't mean to confuse you. What you need to know for the test are these 2 simple formulas. Total float means how far can I move a task up and down the schedule without affecting the final schedule date. Free float means how far can I move a task without affecting the next task in the schedule. So it's dependent task. 2 different calculations. Both of them most of the time come to the same exact number, but I'm saying there are situations where free float is different than total float. For the exam, you need to know what they are. The total float means how far I can move an activity without affecting its final scheduled date. Free float is how far I can move an activity without affecting its dependent activity down the line. Okay? So in the case of D, if it's either late start minus early start or late finish minus early finish. Either way, it's 13 minus 3. I have 10 days of float or slack. That's what I have. If they ask me to do free float, take a look at the free float formula, which is the early start of the next activity. So to figure D, the next activity, the early start of the next activity is 14 minus the early finish of 3 minus 1. I'm sorry, did I show that calculation? Or did I forget to show that calculation? Oh, here it is. Free float. 14. Damn it, Clark. Didn't mean to click. 14 minus 3 minus 1. And the 1 because we didn't start at day 0. We started at day 1. That's why we have to minus the day 1. Okay? This is the free float formula. This is the total float formula. Know that float means how far I can move an activity. Okay? Float is a good thing. It's a project manager's friend because I can't move anything on the critical path, can I? Take a look at critical path. Can't move it. I can't move it. I can't reschedule it. I have to do these right exactly when, so really that's my focus. So when I take a project into execution, I've planned it now, and I take it in execution, I'm looking at my critical path, folks. I'm looking at my critical path. I'm looking at my critical path long before I even take it in execution because there's a point of risk. Risk management's going to want to look at G. Risk management's going to want to look at C because there's so much of activity and so much dependency that there's so many things could go wrong. Okay? I don't want to flood you, but that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to stop there for this evening, folks. Okay? With that, because I don't want to. I promise you on Thursday, we'll go back a few screens. We're going to do both those calculations again and review what we just did. Okay? But you will see what I just showed you on the exam. Are there any any questions about that? Matter of fact, let me put the screen back up there again. Let me put that screen back up there. Let me get this out of the way so that you guys can look at it. Look it over. Think about what we just did from forward, backwards, pass, identifying early start, early finish, late start, late finish, which gave us our critical path, our duration, and float.
I'm trying to process the total float either and as well as the free float. Can you explain that both again? Activity D.
Sure.
Sorry.
No problem at all. There are two types of float, okay? Total float and free float. They usually are the same from a duration, from a number standpoint. When I do the calculation, it's going to be 10 days for D no matter how I do it. But the definition of total float is how far can I move an activity, how far can I move D up and down the schedule without affecting the final schedule date. September 15th is when we're supposed to finish, okay? Total float tells me how far I can move D without affecting September 15th. Free float tells me how far I can move D without affecting G. That's the difference. Free float tells me how far I can move an activity without screwing up its successor. Total float is how far I can move an activity without affecting the deadline date. That's the difference. Usually the calculations come out to be exactly the same. In this case, 10 days. But in very complex spider web areas, there are ways that, of dependencies that they are not exactly the same. Okay? Because real projects are much, much more complex than this.
Okay.
But again, float is your friend. That's your friend, Aubrey. This is where, while you're doing your critical path, where you're going to be able to move some stuff around without asking permission to do it. This is you're running this project, and this is what you want to keep your eye on the ball. When they say keep your eye on the ball, B through I. That's where you're keeping your eye on. Jill, are you okay with all of this so far?
Yep, I'm good.
This will be on the test, so, and I know it's test worthy. So we're gonna go back over these again on Thursday, first thing, and I'm gonna send you some problems to do over the weekend to see if you did get it or not. I hope you did, because if you can blitz through some of these, you're gonna say that these are the time-consuming questions. If you can get these down and you can get these done in a good fashion, a timely fashion, you can get through the test faster. We'll give you time to go back and review some of the questions you weren't so sure of and stuff. You want to be able to buy time, but I want you to be solid with this. So we'll pick it up again on Thursday.
Okay.
Okay, folks. I hope my style and my presentation is making the point that you guys need to have made. I hope it is. I'm open to any feedback at all from you guys now, even on recording. Something I could be doing better, something you're not getting. It's a good time to say it before we knock off.
I think everything. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Aubrey.
Go ahead, Jill.
I was just going to say, I think it was definitely helpful that you started this class with the kind of a summary of what we talked about last week. I mean, the other day, because that kind of just reinforced and reminded me of what you were talking about the other day. So that's good. Good,
and I do that every lecture because I figure I should drop back fall back 5 yards just so we can pick up and get a running start. And you're right, it is effective. So thank you, Jill.
Sometimes seeing this 2 or 3 times, because it's effective also visually.
Yeah.
Now, the truth comes when we have to practice these and make sure that that we understand it.
Well, we're going to do that starting this weekend. You'll get some problems. But like you just said, you can look at this video 1,000 times if you want. And not just my
Right.
video, but any other reliable source to help you, okay, for this. But this is how I explained it. So
Okay.
I'm going to hit the stop record now.
Yeah, good night.